from Gary just to make us all jealous.
It's good news. It's coming back. People.
No, it's brilliant. It's brilliant. Great.
Yeah.
Right, shall we start?
Enjoy it while it lasts.
Are you all right, Bianca? Can I start?
Sure. Now, will I need to unmute myself after you introduce me?
Well, I suggest that you stay unmuted, Eamon, and David starts. And David stays unmuted for the moment. Meanwhile, ladies, gentlemen, and assembled company, welcome to our Monday night session, Connecting the World by Story. And tonight is a special treat. We are exploring. That's not me. Actually, I quite like that sound. It's got like kind of rock and roll storytelling. And we're exploring the three sorrows. And I know nothing about the three sorrows. I don't do sorrow. So I'm going to pass over to someone who knows all about this and, in fact, has created this whole event in the well, I'll let him introduce the people he's brought together for this fantastic event. Ladies and gentlemen, could you please welcome and put your hands together for David Thompson down in Austin in Texas.
Hey, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes,
good.
Indeed.
Well, this was a brainchild of mine, or a brainstorm, or maybe a brain fart, I'm not certain, of the three sorrows of storytelling. And it came together, and I have the wonderful tellers, Eamon Keenan and Abby Simmons. And we're going to be presenting to you the three sorrows of storytelling. So people say, well, what do you mean? What do you mean, three sorrows of storytelling? I mean, this is basically what it is. These are three classic tales from Irish oral and written literature. And they're called the sorrows because they're tragic stories, meaning they deal with the ending, the complete obliteration, if you will, of families, usually the death of the siblings, the children, because, you know, you have to carry on the name. So that is what these are. We have the three stories. We have the children of Lear, which Eamon will be telling, the fate of the sons of Turin, which I will be telling, and Deidre of the Sorrows, which Abby will be telling, in that order. With me? You will be tested on this. I used to teach school. Okay, are we ready? Eamon, over to you.
Yes. Thank you. Can people hear me? Hello?
Yes.
That's great.
Very
Yeah,
well.
we can hear you.
So, the children of Lear. It is said, and truly said, that of all those who came to Ireland in the ancient days, the days of myths and legends, the greatest people for their talent, their bravery, their craft, were the Danann, the children of Danu. They were known as the Tuatha Danann. They held sway over Ireland for many years, but times change. And the sons of Mill, who we now know as the Gael, they came to Ireland and they had their own ways, their own weapons and magic. The Danann knew that their time was ending. There was a gathering then of all the chieftains and all the highborn of the Danann to choose a chieftain who could lead them into the future. Not as a divided people, but a united people. The main contenders were Bob Derg. Now, he was the son of the great Dagda himself, and he knew the mind and ways of the people. He lived in Killaloe, which is in the west of Ireland. The other main contender was Lear. Now, Lear was a great warrior, a strong chieftain, but he was given to short temper and rash behavior. Now, he lived in Ulster as Chief Finnehan. When Bobderg was elected as the chieftain, all but one were pleased, for Lear believed that he was fitter for the position of chieftain. Lear was affronted. Not only was affronted, he was angry, and in a great temper, he left the gathering. When he left the gathering, he did not speak to Bobderg or any of the other chieftains or highboy. He went off on his own, back to his own home in Ulster. And it was when he was there that he realized that he had acted rightly, but he would not go back. But then tragedy came. For Lear was married to a wonderful young woman. This wonderful young woman was well known and respected throughout the whole of the land. She died after a very short illness. Lear was left on his own. When Bobderg heard about this, he said, "It is at a time like this a man needs friendship." And he sent messengers asking that Lear come to his home in friendship, and that when the time was right, perhaps he would consider marrying again. And that Bobderg had 3 children who he fostered. They were each beautiful in their own way, each intelligent in their own way, and each had characters. Niamh was the eldest. She was full of fun and mischief. Aoife was beautiful. She was the middle of the 3. And the youngest was Alba, but she was quite young. She was too young to marry. Now, after a period of time where he became consoled for the loss of his wife, Lear chose one of the 3 young women. Eve actually wanted herself to be chosen, but Aoife was not the one he picked. For the one he chose was the eldest, Niamh. They married, and in due course, they had children, twins, Fionnuala and Ed. And when they were a year old, Niamh gave birth to 2 more twins, Fiachra and Con. And whilst there was joy, especially in the heart of Lear, for having these children brought into the world, there was great sadness, for Niamh died after giving birth. Bobderg again contacted Lear that if he wished, and at the right time, he maybe should marry Aoife, the second of the 3 daughters. He did. And when he did, there was great joy. Aoife loved the children, and she looked after them as they were her own children. But over time, she began to feel inside her a barb of unreasoned jealousy. She felt that Lear spent too much time with the children, and that because she did not have any children, she was put to the side, and that her husband, Lear, snubbed her and did not give her the love that she needed, spending all his time with the children. And so she took to bed, and she stayed in bed for a year. And in her mind, she became lost to reason. Her mind was filled only with jealousy and envy. But at night, quietly and silently, she would visit evil spellcasters, and she plotted. After the year had gone, she became well again, or so she told everyone. In fact, she said, "I want to go and visit my foster father." Bove Derg. I'd like to see his home and my friends. Why don't I bring the children with me? They would love to see their grandfather. Well, the children were delighted, but Fionnuala was slightly suspicious. Why was she being so nice? Aoife had been harsh and spoke hard to her when she was ill. Why was she putting on such a kind face? Well, because they were all going and they were all happy to go and see their grandfather, they got into the chariot and off they went. And as they went off, the children laughed as the wind blew through their hair and the horses ran fast as the wind itself. After a while, they came to Loch Daravara. It was a beautiful day, and the boys looked out and saw the water with the sun shining over it, and asked, "Could we stop? Can we stop and swim for a while?" And Aoife said, "Of course, why not? We can have a picnic." And so they stopped beside the lake, and the children threw off their clothes. Well, the boys did. They were recklessly ran into the water. Well, you know how children are. Fionnuala was less enthusiastic, but Aoife told her, "Go and swim with the boys. Stay with them, keep with them. They'll be all right with you there." And so she went into the water. And they played and they swam and they splashed and were happy. But as they came out of the lake, Aoife took out a golden druidic wand and touched each one of them and put a curse on them. The curse was that they would never be able to live on dry land, because they would become swans. The children were shocked and distressed, for feathers started to grow through their skin. And not only did the feathers grow through their skin, their bodies changed shape, so their necks stretched out and their mouth became a bill, bright orange. And their feet became webbed and small. Their legs shrunk. They cried out, "Why are you doing this to us? We loved you. You loved us." She just laughed. Aoife just laughed at them. And she told them, "You will stay here for 300 years on Loch Daravara. And after 300 years, you will leave and go to the Sea of Moyle, which is in the north of Antrim. And after 300 years there, you will spend time in the Western Ocean at Eris and Ennisglora." The children cried out for mercy. And perhaps she felt some sorrow what she had done. And she said, "You will have your speech and your voices, and you will sing with great beauty, and you will feel no sorrow about being swans. And after 900 years, things will change again, when a prince of the north and a princess of the south are to marry. It is then that the curse will end." Aoife left the children swimming on the water, crying the saddest cries that were ever heard in the land. And Aoife went off in chariot and came to her house, her home, and saw her stepfather, Bove Derg. And she looked at him, and he looked at her and said, "I thought you were coming with the children. Where are the children?" "Oh, no," she said. "Lear has fell out with you, and he refused to send them. He wouldn't let them come with me." Well, as quickly as he could, Bovderg sent word to Lear. And Lear, on hearing this, wondered what had happened to the children. And so he got in his chariot and rode as quickly as he could. And as he passed Loch Daravara, he heard the children crying and calling out to him, "Father, Father, look at us. We are swans. Our Aoife did this. Our stepmother did this to us." Well, after talking to them for a while, Lear left them and went to the house of Bovder. When he was there, questioned Aoife about what had happened. Being confronted with this, she tried to lie and excuse everything that had happened. But they saw through her. And then Lear said, "Of all the things that could ever be done to you, what would be the worst?" And he put her under a geese. Now the geese means you must do as you are told. And so she said to him, "The worst thing that could happen to me will be that I will become a demon of the air." And with that, Lear changed her into a demon of the air. And she flew away into the sky, where she still screams and cries in anger in the dark storms that fly in the clouds, fly around the island. And then Lear and Bovderg and many of the people of the Tuatha De Danann went to Loch Daravara to hear and talk to the swans. Indeed, it was so beautiful to hear them singing, that people from all over Ireland, from different races, the Milesians and the Fomorians also came. And those people who were once enemies were able to sit down and listen to the beautiful singing of the swans. Well, after 300 years, Fionnuala told the people, and Lear and Bovder, that they had to leave as part of the curse was put upon them to leave. And so they said goodbye. And they flew north. They flew north. They flew high above Loch Ness. They flew high above the glens of Antrim. And they landed on Rathlin. When they landed on Rathlin, they were not prepared for what was to happen to them. For the storms that were freezing and harsh, and ice, it was so bitter, the weather. It got so cold during the winter, with the cold wind blowing through them, and the storms that happened. And sometimes it would be so cold that their poor feet would stick, and they could only pull off when they pulled off their own skin. And then when they went into the sea and swam, the salty water gave them much pain. On one particular night, there was a horrendous storm, and the 4 children were separated by the winds. And it was just lucky that Fionnuala was able to stand on Carrick-on-Roe, the rock of seals on Rathlin, and she called out to the children. She called out for her 3 brothers, loudly and clearly. At first there was no answer, and then there was the bedraggled figure of her brother A. And then Fiacra came. It wasn't until the next day that Con came. And unlike his 2 brothers, he was fresh and he was quite happy, for he had found the most wonderful cave in Scotland and had spent time resting there. Well, Some days were harsh and some days were harsher. Some days were warm and some days were warmer. But time passed. The 300 years passed slowly. And again, they knew they would have to leave. They would have to leave and go to the west. But before they went to the west, they flew over the home of Lear. But there was nothing there. Everything had changed. And they flew over their foster father's home in Killaloe. And they saw no sign of their people or of the buildings of the people. There was a new race in the land. Well, they then flew to the islands. And on the islands, they found that the weather was harsh at days, but there were kindly people there. And those people looked after them, and they loved to hear the swans singing. Not only were they kind, one of them was a silversmith. He worked with metal, and he made the two twins a chain that they could tie around their neck and went to the other one, so that no one would be left alone if there was a terrible storm. And the local people would hear them singing, and when they heard their singing, they too felt that they were blessed. Now, the 300 years passed, and the Prince of Connaught, Larry Neame, was to marry Decca, the Princess of Munster. She knew of the swans and wished to have them as a gift for her wedding. She insisted that this take place, and Larry Neame felt he had to get these swans and bring them to the court where Decca sat. He was not happy about it, but he had to do it if he was to get married. And he went to the island of Innisglora, and there he saw the swans and he heard them. And despite being amazed at their beautiful singing, he grabbed their chains and began to drag them away from the water. As soon as their feet touched the dry land, their swan feathers fell off them, and their human shape returned, no longer beautiful. The swans were no more. And what was in its place? Well, the oldest people in the world. Their skin was wrinkled, their bodies bony and shriveled. They had aged greatly. The people gathered round them to try and protect them, and it was then that Fionnuala and her brothers gathered in a circle with the last of their strength. They raised their arms in the air and they spoke out together. The golden days are past. Our people have gone. We lift our voices to sing praises to those who have been here in the past, so that all might know of the greatness of the things they did and all they achieved. And so they began to sing gloriously of the Tuath de Danann. They named the names of the chieftains and the warriors and the wise men, the druids. And they spoke of their deeds, and they sang of the treasures and the goodness of that magnificent time. The people stood staring and listening in wonder and amazement. Then the singing of a great host came echoing back from all around, from the mountains, from the skies and the seas, and the singing was of such great beauty that the people stood in awe, and many felt their hearts fill up, and tears ran freely. Suddenly, a great brightness came from everywhere, and the hillsides opened, and a beautiful shining host of figures came forth, their arms stretched out in welcome to the children. And it was then that the children returned. They left their bodies, and their shining spirits joined the great host. They were transformed into their childhood bodies, and they left with the great host of the Dudanan. So the children of Lear were welcomed back to their families and taken to the land of everlasting youth, which they know as Turin and Og. And that is where they lived happily evermore. And we are left with their story and many other stories from that time, and the music and song. But here is the end of the story, the tragic story of the children of Lear.
Oh, thank you, Eamon. That was absolutely beautiful. Absolutely beautiful.
Thank
Well,
you.
friends. Oops, I'm muted. Hold on. Hold on. Come on. There we go. Can you hear me now? Good. Okay. Wow. Thank you, Eamon. That was absolutely gorgeous. My story is the fate of the sons of Turin. And before I begin, I would like to have in advance have any apologies for my abilities to pronounce the names. Okay? All right, here we go. This is the fate of the sons of Turin. Give ear to the fate of the sons of Turin. Remember with words both kind and brave. Sing of the tale of the sons of Turin. Do not let their memories lie in the grave. For it was in that time that Lou Lamfada, Lou of the Long Hand, called forth to the different homes, to different clans, to the people, to come to him, to form an army, to stop the invasion of the Fomorians. And surely the families and the clans and the people responded, and they came to him. For it was in that time that Kian, head of the House Contra, was riding to join combined armies. And it was in that time that Kieran understood that 3 men, 3 brothers, 3 sons of Turin were following him, for there was a vicious blood feud between the House of Contra and the House of Turin. And on the plain of Materma, Kian realized that he could not outrun them. So he unhorsed himself, slapped the horse so the horse would leave, and remembering Druid words, Druid magic, Druid spells, touched himself and became a swine and joined a herd of wild swine, rooting for grubs and roots. The 3 sons, the 3 brothers, the 3 men of the House of Turin, Brian, Yochar, and Yochabar, stopped. And they looked around and they could not find where the man went. And Brian said to his brothers, "Do you not remember our training? For surely we can find and we can see an enchanted creature." And Brian, using Druid words, Druid magic, and Druid spells, touched the heads of his brothers and turned them into vast wolfhounds who went running after the herd of swine and moved them away until there was only one left. And that one was Kian. Kian of the House Contra. And Kian realized that he was surrounded, but he ran anyway until he was cornered by the 2 wolfhounds. And Brian came forth and said, "We know who you are. We know that there is a blood feud between our 2 families. And it is up to me to kill you. But first, and he touched his two brothers and changed them back into men. And Brian took a spear and pierced the side of the swine. And it was then that a voice came. Do not kill me in pig form. Let me change back into human form. Very well. And Cian went from swine to human. And he was holding his side where he'd been pierced by the sword, the spears. And he also said, you shall not kill me with sword or spear. And Brian said, very well. So he and his two brothers picked up great rocks and crushed the life out of Cian. They ignominiously dragged his body, dug a grave, threw it in, put the stones on top, got back on their horses, and went to Lú Chlamfada. And they arrived. And the battle was glorious. The battle was victorious. And the Fomorians were turned back. And there in Tara, at the High King, the Ardrai himself, was a great feast, and all the men who had survived the battle were there, and they were feasting and drinking and bragging, and maybe a few fights also. We don't know. We weren't there. Lou with a long hand looked around, and he looked for his father. He looked and he could not find him. Maybe his father had been killed. He must go get the body. So Lou turned to the Ardrai, the High King, in the hall in the court of Tara, and told him that he must take a few of his retainers and go find his father's body. And the Ardrai nodded and gave him permission to leave. And they left. And they rode. And they stopped on the plain of Materna. And they saw that ragged pile of rocks. And from those rocks came a voice. Revenge me. I have been murdered. Revenge me. And they removed the rocks and they found the body of Cian of the House Contra, Lou's father. And they dug a correct grave and they put him in correctly. And they piled the stones correctly. And they had one stone where they carved his name. And Lou turned to his people and said, not a word when we return. And that's what happened. They returned to the hall and to the court of Tara, to the High King, the Ardrai. And there was feasting and singing and dancing and bragging stories and most likely a few fights. Remember, we were not there. And Lou put up his hand for attention. And he said, I know through the voice of my dead father that someone within this gathering murdered him on his way. Well, the three men, the three brothers, the three sons of Turin bowed their heads. And what do we do? Brian said, no, say nothing, say nothing. His two brothers, Yochar and Yochavar, said, no, we must confess, for it is honor. And so those two stood up and they said, it is us, it is we, with our brother Brian. For great was the blood feud. And Lou, holding in his anger, said, you have a blood, Eric. You have a blood price to pay before you are forgiven. And I will give you what you must do. 1, you must go to the Garden of the Hesperides and bring 3 of the golden apples, the apples that are the size of a child's head and are golden and shining in the sun. The apples that one bite will cure any illness. 2, you must go to the king of Greece and bring back his fabulous pigskin that placed over anyone who has wounds. The wounds are instantly healed. 3, you must go to the king of Persia and bring back the angry spear, the spear point which would slay entire armies, burn cities, the spear point that must be kept in a bucket of water with magic herbs. 4, you must bring the 2 steeds in the chariot from the king of Sicily, for they will travel over land and sea with no problems. 5, you must go to the king of the golden pillars and bring the 7 pigs that he has. For these pigs, once eaten at night, in the morning are whole yet again. 6, you must go to the king of Eroe to get a whelp from his famous hound. For the whelp also carries the magic abilities to run as fast as possible, corner and kill any beast. 7, you must go and get the cooking spit from the fey women of the Isle of Bechori, for on that spit there is always food. And 8, you must go to the hill defended by Mochen and his sons. And at the top of the hill, you must give 3 shouts to the sunrise. And when these are done, then you will have my judgment. So the 3 men, the 3 brothers, the 3 sons of Turin went and told their father what they must do. And their father said, go to Mananan Maclear. He has 2 things you must ask for. 1, ask for his horse, the horse that knows no problems. He will automatically refuse. Secondly, ask for his famous boat, Wave Rider, the boat that needs no oarsman, that needs no sail, that all you do is tell it where you wish to go, and it goes on its own volition. He must always honor the second request. And that is what they did. They went to Mananan Maclear, and they asked him first for the horse, and he said no. Then they asked him for his boat, the Wave Rider, and he agreed. Down to where the Wave Rider was docked. And with Mananan Maclear were the 3 men, the 3 brothers, the 3 sons of Turin, their sister Ethne. And she sang a song of farewell as the brothers got on the boat. And they said, we must go to the Garden of the Hesperides. And the boat, on its own volition, went there, and they arrived, and they pulled it up onto the shore. And there in the distance, they saw a glow. Certainly this must be the tree where the golden apples are. And surely there must be guardians. So Brian turned to his brothers and said, we will be our falcons, and we will go and we will fly straight there. We will each get an apple, and we will fly back to the boat. And that is what he did. They all changed into beautiful large falcons. They all flew with the great speed, and they went and they got to the tree. And under the tree were the guardians, 3 golden-haired women. Well, surely this would be no guardian problems. So each one grabbed one, and Brian grabbed a 4th one. And they were flying back when the 3 golden-haired maidens changed into great griffins, great harpies, and chased after them, throwing darts and fire. And the brothers said, we are burning, and Brian turned them into swans. They dove into the sea. The fire, and they got to the boat. We must now go to Greece. And Wave Rider took them there. They pulled up onto the shore. They were walking to the palace of the king of Greece. And how shall we do this? The Greeks love poetry. We will be traveling bards. We will sing poems and paeans of praise to the king. And he will give us what we need. And so it was. Their songs compared the king to oaks and cliffs and boulders and strengthened the beauty of the sky. And the king was moved, and he said, my friends, what is it you ask for in return? And Brian, who was the spokesperson, said, we need the skin of the pig that you have that laid over a wounded person cures them. Oh, and the king says, no, 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 no. I will bring out the pig skin, and we'll bring out gold from our treasury, and we will fill it overflowing, and you may have the gold. So they did. They brought out crates of gold, and they brought out the pig skin, and just as it was laid down, Brian grabbed the skin. The brothers pulled their swords, and there was a great battle in the court, but they escaped. They got to the boat, and they left. Now we must go to the king of Sicily, and the boat took them there. Now, how shall we do this? How shall we do this? We will be mercenaries. We will join his army, and we will show him what great warriors we Irish are. And that is what they did. And they defeated all of the king's men in battle. They defeated all the king's men in playful battle. Oh, you are definitely great warriors, said the king. What should you do? He said, we would like to see the 2 horses in your chariot. Can you have them in a parade? And that is what he did. And so the entire population of the city was there. And the beautiful parade was happening. And there comes the chariot with the 2 horses. And then it passed. The 3 brothers, the 3 men, the 3 sons of Turin jumped into the chariot, knocked out the charioteer, and took off. And they got to the boat. They got in the boat and said, now we must go to Persia. And the boat took them to Persia. Now, how should we do this? We will be poets again. We will be traveling bards. For the Persians love poetry, especially those that praise their ruler. And that is what they did. Oh, and they gave beautiful songs. They gave great poetry, and they did beautiful paeans of praise. And they noticed that by the throne of the king of Persia was a spear upside down. Verily, that was the angry spear. And then the king said, truly, you are great poets. What would you like in return? And they said, oh, we would like your angry spear. Ah, you shall not! Guards, guards! And Brian and his 2 brothers pulled out their swords, and they fought their way. They fought their way. They grabbed the spear in the bucket. They went back to the boat, and it took off. And all their wounds were cured by lying under the pigskin. Now we must go to the golden pillars, and the boat took them there. And it was there that they met the king, and they talked to him, and told him their story. And the king was very, very moved. And he said, yes, you may have my 7 pigs. Those that when they are eaten, the next day are full and alive again. I will bring them to you, but I will come with you. For I will go with you to the Uruguay, where their king is my son-in-law. And I will tell him your story. And so it was. The 3 men, the 3 brothers, the 3 sons of Turin, all of what they had, plus the king of the golden pillars, went to Uruguay on the boat. And when they arrived, the king of the golden pillars called forth to his son-in-law, the king of Uruguay, and he explained to them, he explained to the court and to his son-in-law what was requested. Well, since it came from one king to another king, the king of Uruguay said, well, definitely, for she has just given birth. And definitely these men, these poet, warrior, bards, they may have one. And so it was that a whelp of the great hound of Uruguay, whose speed and ferocity were legendary, that whelp was given to the boys. And they got back in the boat. And as they were in the boat, back in Tara, back in the court of the great high king, the Ardrai, Lou of the long hand, using druid words, druid magic, and druid spells, sent a veil of forgetfulness to the three men, the three brothers, the three sons of Turin, making them believe that they had finished their quest. The three brothers, the three men, the three sons of Turin arrived at the court of the high king, the Ardrai. He said, here, we have brought to you the golden apples. We have brought to you the pigskin. We have brought to you the angry spear. We have brought to you the 2 steeds in the chariot. We have brought to you the 7 pigs. We have brought to you the whelp. Our blood price is fulfilled. Oh, poor men. And Lou laughed. And he said, there are 2 more that you must do. I brought you back on purpose. The next one, you must go to the Isle of Fijore. You must dive to the very bottom of the sea. You must get the cooking spit of the Fey women and bring it back. And when you do, I will give you your last quest. The 3 men, the 3 brothers, the 3 sons of Turin agreed. They went back to the boat, the wave rider. They told the boat where they must go. And it went over the seas and the waves and stood still. Brian, using druid words, druid magic, druid spells, touched himself, and he was encased in crystal. And he dove overboard, down, 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 down he went until the sea floor, and there he met the red-headed sea nymphs. Oh, hello, and how are you? And Brian told him who he was and told him why he was there. And the sea nymph said, oh, really? Well, if you had brought your brothers, you would not have survived. Go now. Take the spit and leave before we change our minds. And so he did. And he swam up, 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 reached the top of the ocean, was pulled into the boat by his brothers. We must now go back to Tara. And the boat took them back to the coast. And from there, they went to the court of the high king, the Ardrai. They went and they presented the cooking spit to Lou of the long hand. And your last quest. You must go to a hill defended by Mochen and his sons and climb to the top of the hill and give 3 cheers to the sunrise. But be aware that Mochen and his 2 sons have a sacred duty to keep everyone away, and their swords are magicked. So the three brothers, the three men, the three sons of Turin made their way to that hill. And they looked up. They looked up in the night at the top of the hill and seeing the stars. And, well, it is very quiet. Maybe they are sleeping. And they began their ascent. Halfway there, "And who are you?" a voice rang out. "We are the three brothers, the three sons of Turin." "Why are you here?" "We have come to give three shouts to the sunrise from the peak of this mountain." "Nay, my sons and I are to stop anyone from doing that. Draw your weapons." And so they did, and oh, back and forth and up and down and through the swords rose and fell. Many wounds were taken, slits in the arm, stabs to the shoulder, slits in the legs. But the three men, the three brothers, the three sons of Turin defeated and killed Mochen and his two sons. And though they were bleeding profusely and tired and fatigued, they came to the top of the hill. And just as the sun began to crest the horizon, they shouted three cheers. Huzzah! 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 And holding each one up, arms are wrapped around each other, they limped their way down the hill. They limped their way to their home. And their father, Turin, brought them in and washed them himself and had their wounds bound. But since these wounds were made by magical means, there was no healing, no cure. And Brian, the oldest, spoke to his father and said, "Father, take your trusted servant and go to the Hall of Tara. Go to the Art Rye. Tell him that we made the three cheers." And he did. Swift they rode. Swift they rode to the court of the Art Rye, and they confronted and said, "My sons, through me, for I will not lie, my sons have done the three cheers from the top of the dwelling of the mound of Mochen and his two sons. Is the blood price fulfilled? Are they forgiven?" And Lou said, "Oh, yes, they are forgiven. But the blood price is not fulfilled. For this is the curse upon your home, upon your house. The blood price will never be fulfilled as long as there is any descendant of your family. Go." So Turin and his trusted servant rode back to their home. And he entered into the chamber where his three sons were lying, wrapped in bandages, being sung to by beautiful maidens. And Brian, Father, are we forgiven? Is the blood price fulfilled? And Turin looked at his sons, Brian, Yochar, and Yochavar, and said, you are forgiven. The blood guilt, the blood price is forever. And at that moment, the three sons, the three brothers, the three sons of Turin breathed their last and died. And Turin, on his knees, gathered the best way he could his three sons to his arms and kissed each one on the forehead, the three men, the three brothers, his three sons. And it was said that around you could hear a great crack as though a tree broke in half. For Turin's heart broke, and he laid down with them, and he died. Give ear to the tale of the sons of Turin. Remember with words both kind and brave. Sing of the tale of the sons of Turin. Do not let their memories lie in the grave. Okay. Abby, you're next.
Thank you, David. Hi, everyone. So I get to end the sorrows. It sounds like a terrible thing to do, doesn't it? Okay, my friends, I hope you're sitting comfortably. I'm stretched on your grave, and I'll lie here forever. Oh, if your hand were in mine, I'd be sure it would not sever my apple tree, my brightness. It's time we were together, for I smell of the earth and am worn by the weather. It was midnight, and an old woman hurried through the forest with a newborn baby hidden beneath the folds of her cloak. The child was born under a curse, you see. On the night that she was born, King Connor had asked his druid Cathbad to speak a prophecy for the child that was about to be born to his harpist, his ballad singer. And Cathbad, he went outside and he read the stars and he threw the bones, and he came back to court with a cloud upon his brow. The child will be a girl, the old man spoke, and her name will be Deirdre. And she will grow to be the most beautiful woman Ireland has known before or since. But this beauty will come at a price. And this beauty, Deirdre, she will be the undoing of the Red Branch warriors, and she will cause the fall of Ulster. And though the warriors of the Red Branch, the finest warriors of Ulster, they gathered around King Connor and they begged him to kill the infant before she could grow up and destroy what they had built, destroy their band of warriors. But Connor, he was a good king, and he quietened them and he said, I will not have the blood of an infant on my hands. I will not have the blood of an infant on any of your hands. And then Cathbad saw an expression, something changed in the king's face. But if this baby is to grow up to be as beautiful As my old druid says, well, I will marry her. For what better protection can there be for her or for the warriors assembled here, the Red Branch, than to be my wife? And so it was when the baby was born. Connor entrusted the newborn into the arms of Laucum, the old seeress, the poet, the wise woman. And she hurried through the dark wood to her little house in the very, very center of the valley. And there the old woman spoke words of power, and her old breasts brought forth creamy, rich mother's milk. And as the new baby sucked and suckled, it seemed to anybody watching, but of course nobody was, that the old woman's lined and worn face grew younger in the gaze of that infant. And Laucum taught Deirdre as she grew the ways of the woods. She taught her how to speak to the trees, how to see the future in the stars. She taught her the herbs of the forest that can heal and harm. She told her stories. And Deirdre, she grew fiery under Laucum's care. She grew strong under Laucum's care. And as Laucum watched and saw from Deirdre's 12th year, King Connor come on regular visits, she saw that as Connor gazed at her, well, the girl that she saw as her daughter, she felt a fear building in her chest as she realized that this wonderful wild girl, her destiny was not her own. And King Connor's gazes as she aged became more and more lustful and desiring. It was early spring in Deirdre's 17th year, and Laucum had brought an early calf, a very young calf, to sacrifice, to give thanks for the coming spring and to hasten the Queen of Winter on her way. It was very early spring, and the snow still lay sparkling white upon the earth. And Deirdre watched. She watched as that calf was killed, as she had done many times before. And she watched as the red blood bloomed in the pale white snow. And from somewhere up above and behind her, a flap of wings and a caw of a raven that landed and began pecking at the carcass, began pecking at the blood. Red blood, white snow, raven black wings. The next thing Deirdre knew, she was being slapped awake, and she opened her eyes and saw the old woman's face looking down at hers with somewhere between concern and irritation. Pish, what is wrong with you, girl? You have seen this before. Did you just fall down in a faint of fear? It was not of fear, old mother, spoke Deirdre. It was of love. The red, the white, the black. I am in love with those colours. They have slipped into my soul. Oh, pish, girl, get up with you. There is more to be done. And it seemed to Deirdre that the old woman had disregarded her words, disregarded her dreams, disregarded her feelings, and in a sort of anger built in her chest. But if she had been awake later that night, as she dreamed of those three colours, if she had seen, she would have known that Laucum sat by the fire, gazing into the flames, that flutter of fear for her girl, growing and growing, for Laucum was wise and she knew the difference between a dream and destiny. And she knew that King Connor was broad and bronzed and blonde. He was not of the colouring that Deirdre desired. Early autumn, and King Connor decided that the warriors of the Red Branch would go on a visit to Laucum's Valley, for there was excellent hunting there. And he split them up and he told them to go which way they would. And at the end of the day, they would gather together in his makeshift camp, and they would see which of the warriors had caught the best and the finest game that day. King Connor himself, well, he slipped away, for he wished to see how the ward that would be his wife one day was growing. And he went to Lowcombe's house. But Deirdre wasn't there. She was off walking in the woods, listening to the whispers of the trees and the call of the wind. And as she walked, she caught the sight of something black, something as black as the raven, but it did not move like a raven. And she followed that shape in between the trees until it moved into a clearing. And there, from behind a tree, Deirdre saw hair as black as the raven's wing, skin as white and pale as snow, and lips as red as the cherry, as red as the rose, as red as blood. Neusha, son of Ushnik, was out hunting with his 3 brothers when he felt a gaze fall upon him, and he turned, and stepping out of the woods, there was a woman ablaze, a woman on fire, a waterfall, a fiery mass of red gold hair cascading down her, and eyes that burned into his soul. And though he had never seen this woman in his life before, his soul, his spirit, his stars, he knew her. Lady, he stumbled, I am Neusha, son of Ushnik, and I am yours. I know, spoke the woman. My name is Deirdre, Deirdre of the woods, and as you are mine, I am yours. You must take me from this place, and we must leave tonight, and we must be together. And Neusha's brother pulled on his arm, and he said, come on, you know the stories. If this is Deirdre, then she does not belong to you. She belongs to the king. And his younger brother pulled on his arm, and he said, come on, she's pretty, but there are lots of pretty girls. We cannot be caught here. But Neusha, he couldn't move, and Deirdre saw that she needed to speak more than words, and she breathed in the forest itself, and she spoke words that silenced the stars and the birds. I lay a guise upon you, Neusha, son of Ushnik, an oath, a curse. Would you go against the whisperings of your own soul? Would you betray yourself? You belong to me and I belong to you, and we must leave and we must be together. You know this to be true. And once a guise is spoken, well, it cannot be broken, not without pain of death. And so it was that very moment, Neusha and his brothers, for they would not be parted, and Deirdre of the woods fled. They fled from King Connor. They fled from Ulster. They fled as far and as fast as they could. And that night, an old woman sat in her empty hut, sat on Deirdre's cold, empty bed and wept. When King Connor had found out what the sons of Ushnik had done, he set himself into a fearful rage, and he put a price upon their head that no man could resist. And soon they had to flee on a small boat to Scotland to escape his desires, to escape the hand of his power. And there are stories I could tell you of Deirdre and the sons of Ushnik in Scotland. How the King of Scotland, when he caught ear of the story that there was a woman, the most beautiful woman that Ireland had ever known, who'd escaped from King Connor, he wanted her for his own, and that was a whole adventure, a whole story. But Deirdre outwitted him, and they escaped. But it was hard. Life was hard. And they had to flee from one place to another until finally they found themselves in the far north, on the shores of an island, and the Isle of Skye. And there they were under the care, under the protection of the shadowy warrior, the shadowy one, Scatath, a female warrior of huge renown, of great mystery, who would go on to train some of the most highly respected warriors of Ireland. But they are other stories for other nights. But what I can tell you is that it was the first place that Deirdre had known the company of other women other than her old mother. And it was there that the steel of her spirit was tempered and strengthened, and she began to know herself a little. And for a time, the sons of Uisneach and Deirdre lived in peace. Until one night, Deirdre had a dream. She dreamt that a raven flew from Ireland to Scotland, and in its beak it carried drips of golden honey. And it dripped and dropped and fell onto the white sands of Skye. And it fell not as honey, but as blood. And when she awoke, she knew what was to come. The next morning, Deirdre and Noisha sat on the beach playing a game of chess. And as Noisha looked down at the chessboard, oh, he felt like a god, moving those pieces, watching the soldiers fall and his king stand strong. And as Deirdre played that game, oh, she moved her pieces this way and that, trying to outflank, outmaneuver, change the story. But no matter what she did, her warriors fell and the king stood strong. There was a shout from down the beach, and Noisha rose. That sounded like an Irishman. It was just the wind, said Deirdre. Sit down, let us carry on playing. And Noisha played, and he felt again like a god and watched the warriors fall. And again, Deirdre tried to outmaneuver, tried to change the story of that match, but whatever she did, it just didn't make a difference. And again, there was a shout from down the beach. Noisha, son of Uisneach. That was the voice of an Ulsterman, said Noisha, rising. No, it was just the wind. Play on, and play on they did, but soon there was another shout from down the beach and across the sands. Noisha, son of Uisneach, it is I. And the boy turned, and there was Fergus MacRoy, and there are tales of Fergus MacRoy. He was the most trusted. He was the most respected. He was an aged warrior of high renown. And he came walking across the beach, and the three sons of Uisneach, oh, they raced towards him, and they flung their arms around the great warrior, and there was great rejoicing. And Fergus said to the boys, King Connor has chosen to forgive you for stealing what was rightfully his. Come, let us welcome you back to the stronghold of Emin Macha. Let us welcome you back to Ulster. Let us welcome you back to the Red Branch. And oh, the sons of Uisneach, their hearts danced in their chest. And they planned to go the very next morning. And Deirdre, she did try. She tried to speak sense to Noisha. She told him of her dream, and he said, oh, pish woman, it's just a dream. This is Fergus MacRoy. I trust him implicitly. I trust him with my life. And she said, it is not Fergus that I am worried about. But the next morning, the sons of Uisneach crowded into the prow of Fergus's little boat. They sailed back to Ireland, and Deirdre stood in the stern of that ship, and she gazed back towards the east, towards Scotland, the last place she would ever know happiness. But my friends, when your destiny is not your own, the only thing you can save is your breath. And for the rest of the journey, she stayed silent. They got back, and there the sons of Uisneach, they raced onto Irish shore, and they ran ahead, fleeing, running, following their hearts back to Ulster, back to Emin Macha, excited. But Fergus, he hung back with Deirdre, and he said, My girl, I don't want you to worry. I trust Connor, and I give you my word that I will stay with you and I will lay down my life if need be. I will protect you and I will protect those boys with my life. And for a moment, Deirdre maybe felt a little comfort, but it seemed only a matter of moments later that a rider, just as they were approaching Macca, a rider came up and said, "Ah, my Lord Fergus, I am a servant of the local landowner over there, and he is throwing a feast in your honor." And something changed in Fergus's face, and his countenance darkened. For there was a guise, a curse, an oath on Fergus MacRoy, that if anyone, anywhere at any time was throwing a feast in his honor, well, he was duty bound, honor bound to go on pain of death. And Fergus knew that, and Connor knew that too. And he turned to Deirdre, and in a voice that shook with worry but tried to sound strong, "It'll be all right. I trust Connor. I will be with you as soon as I can." And with that, Fergus rode out of this story. The sons of Uisneach and Deirdre were met at Macca not by King Connor or by any of the warriors, but by an old woman. Laucham, Deirdre ran to her and she grasped her hands, and a knowing passed between those two women. Something of love and something more of sorrow. "Come with me," spoke Laucham. "You are to stay in the Speckled House tonight." It was a house at the very edge of the stronghold where the warriors would hang their weapons and the spoils of war. And there, the sons of Uisneach and Deirdre, they were kind of made comfortable. They were given some food, and Laucham left. And Deirdre, to pass the time, to try to settle the quaking of her soul, she asked Noisha to play chess with her. And Noisha looked down at that chessboard, and he was like a god moving those pieces, and he felt so strong and so powerful as the warriors fell around his king, and his king stayed strong. And Deirdre, she sent up a silent prayer to the gods, to the winds, to the fire, to the earth, to anything that was listening, that something would change, but no matter what move she made, no matter how she manipulated the pieces on that chessboard, the warriors fell, and the king stayed strong. Sons of Uisneach, a bare growl of an angry king stirred the night air. "You have taken what was rightfully mine. You have stolen what belonged to me. The price is death. Come and pay it." And they pushed Deirdre behind them, and the sons of Uisneach, they took out their swords and their blades, and at once the Speckled House was full of battle as the Red Branch warriors, led by King Connor, they set to war with the sons of Uisneach. And the sons of Uisneach, they did fight because they were amazing warriors, but these men were once their brothers, and they did not want to kill them, and there were just too many of them. And soon Deirdre saw the sons of Uisneach grabbed and dragged out of the house to lay before the feet of Connor the king. And Connor took Noisha by the hair, and he said, "You will die for what you have taken from me." And he called to his Red Branch warriors, and he said, who amongst you will do the deed?" And the youngest son, Arlen, he turned to the king and he said, Please take me first. I have not lived a moment on this earth without my brothers. Please take my life. I do not want to breathe a moment without them." And then Arden, the second youngest, spoke up and he said, please take me next. For I haven't breathed a breath upon this earth without Noisha being there, and I do not wish to now. And Noisha looked up at his king and he said, "I have a sword given to me by my foster father, MacMannon MacLear." And those of you who know that name will know what power it carries. Take the sword. It will cut through anything and it will kill us all three at once. And we do not have to live without one another. And Connor nodded his head. And the sword was taken, but no one would stand forward except for one of the Red Branch warriors. I will do this thing, a man called Owen. For these men, they killed my father many years ago, and I will gladly take their lives. And he picked up the sword. And all Deirdre could do is watch as the man that she loved, the one whose soul was knit together with her own, died that day as his white skin gave way to red blood that soaked into the black earth. And the steel and the fire of her soul, it went to ice. And Connor, he took her to these beautiful rooms that he had made ready for her. And he told her that it was all going to be okay now. And he gave her beautiful blue robes and golden brooches and all sorts of fine foods and things. And he came every day and he sang his love to her. And Deirdre, gosh, she wouldn't even look at him. And she wouldn't speak. Because, my friends, when your destiny is not your own, the only thing you can save is her breath. And she could not even turn to look at that man that meant so little to her. And after a year and a day of wooing her, of wooing the woman who was supposed to be his wife, something cracked in Connor and he said, right, enough. I get it, you hate me. She said, I don't hate you. I don't think anything of you. The only one I hate is Owen. The one who cut the head and ended the life of my Neusha. And Connor said, fine then. If you will not do my bidding, then maybe you will do his. I will give you to Owen and see what he will do with you. The next morning, just as the grey fingers of dawn were stretching over the mountains, two men and one woman in a little cart left Emin-Macha. Deirdre was held tight in between Owen and Connor, and the two men laughed and joked. You are like a ewe between two strong rams, and they wouldn't let her move or breathe. It was just as the cart was coming up a narrow and rarely walked mountain pass over to Owen's land, and the sun made the grey rocks of the cliffs of that mountain glitter and glimmer and shine. And Deirdre let her body go limp. For her destiny was never her own, she realised. And so, as she went limp, the men's hands on her shoulder, they loosened slightly, and in one breath, Deirdre ripped herself from their grasp and threw herself from that chariot and against the grey rocks of the cliffs. And her white skin gave way to red blood that warmed the black and grey stones of those mountains. And there are tales to be told about what came to pass, how Fergus MacRoy reacted when he found what had happened to the sons of Ushnik and the ones that he had given his word of protection to. And there are stories of their adventures that Connor had and the downfall of the king, but it is not about them. The next morning, a group of women led by, an old woman now, an old wise woman. They came walking over the mountains and they took the body of Deirdre of the Sorrows, and they took her to a wood and they buried her with the herbs and the words of power and magic next to the body of Neusha, son of Ushnik. And Lauchen wept as she threw clods of earth over her girl, the one born under sad and sorry stars. But they say They say in the time before the time before the woods of Ireland were taken by the invaders, they say that there were 2 trees in a wood in a beautiful valley, 2 trees that grew and intertwined together. And they say truly, that those 2 trees grew from 2 graves, but the souls of those 2 young people, those 2 lovers, why, they had long since fled to Tir Nanog, the land of the ever young. And with that, we end the story of Deirdre of the Sorrows, and the lost sons of Ushnik.
Oh, that was beautiful, Abby. Oh,
Very
and
sad.
thank the 3 of you.
Lovely, Abby. Absolutely gorgeous.
Yeah.
Very
Now,
sad.
oh, yeah, it's sad, but I feel like I've been in a mead hall, sitting and just listening to you 3. It's been great, and I also understand now why I, very early in my storytelling life, which was only yesterday, yeah, I found a book in a second-hand shop of Mackenzie's Celtic Legends, and it had in there the Irish Iliad. And I looked at it and I thought, I'll never be able to remember any of this. But I need to hear I need to hear people selling it. And I feel like I had a chunk tonight. It was great. It was beautiful. And thank you all 3. And if any, I think we should retire to the bar now. Bianca, we won't be long. I know it's in Romania. It's nearly it's well, let's see. It's half
almost
past
10
7. It's half past
It's
9
fine.
there. So,
It's fine. It's fine.
okay, so but we usually retire to the bar or our virtual bar, whatever it is, whatever we can think about, and talk. And if anyone has any questions for any of these 3, can you unmute yourself, and or just if you want to tell them how magnificent they've been.
Share a whiskey.
Yeah,
It was magnificent.
Just pour myself out one. Yeah, that's not a
Thank
bad
you very
idea.
much. Really enjoyed it. Really tragic. I'm crying into my dinner.
All right. Well, I think.
No whiskey. I don't drink, but I have good water.
Oh, good. Oh, yes, because it's not really whiskey time where you are, is it?
I don't drink at all, but no, it isn't.
Oh,
Go.
God.
See you all. Bye-bye.
Bye, Gary. Take care.
Bye,
See you soon, I
Gary.
hope.
Right. Before you all
Enjoy your live
go.
storytelling.
Before you all go, next Mondays is we're talking about we're leading a discussion. Well, Justine Demir is leading a discussion on storytelling beyond spoken language. So, if language is a barrier, how can we add to the stories to make them more accessible? And Sheila Arnold is coming in on that discussion, which I'm really looking forward to. And Nana, I think, is coming on to that discussion, and Sarah it's gonna be a great night. And we've got later this week, well, no, tomorrow night we've got the first of the whole series stuff, Kingdom 1000 big project, and on Wednesday is a poet, Francis Roberts Riley, who's the direct descendant of John Roberts, the great Welsh gypsy storyteller and harp player. So it's going to be it's always a great week at the World Storytelling Cafe. So anytime you want to join, if you see live or you want to catch up, but if you want to pay tribute tonight, there's a little hat there, and tonight's takings will go straight to the tellers in Marrakesh, because there's no social security down there, and there's just no safety net at all. So whenever there's something like this where there's loads of people, we just put the tribute to them. So if you want to go to the site and put a little in the hat, it will go to a very good. It'll keep a few storytellers literally alive, I think. So thank you very much, and thank you all. And thank all 3 of you.
You're very welcome.
David, thank you for organising this. this
Well,
great.
thank you all, period.
Yeah, it's yeah, and everyone else who came. I mean, it was a really good house tonight. We've had 2 nights of good houses. We had Alicia Weir last night. If you didn't see it, worth
missed
catching
Liz.
up on.
Yeah.
And of course, if you just want to tell people about tonight, it's always in the archive. They can always see it anytime they want. Thank you, Eamon.
Thank you very
We
much.
still
It was
remember
brilliant.
you're here despite you being here an hour and a half ago. You're still with us, bless you. So good night, everyone. And
Good
thank
night.
you.
Good night. Thank you.
Night.
Good night.
Night, Eamon.